Chapter 2, Family Portrait, February 19th, 2010. Rebecca pushed aside the curtain to look out the kitchen window, forgetting for a moment the faucet was on. It wasn't snow out there. It was everything but snow. It was ice. It was sleet. It was freezing rain. It was hail. What the differences were, she didn't know or care. She just knew ice was the worst. "He'll be fine," she heard Dan say as he reached around her to shut off the running water. "He gets caught up in work. Talk to him. He'll listen." "He won't." Dan set a magazine he'd been leafing through down on the counter. "He hasn't listened to me in a long time. He thinks he's onto something," Rebecca said, turning back toward the kitchen table and sitting down. "It's the same way it was with your father." Dan sighed and shook his head. "Don't you always say they're the same? They're not." Headlights shined through the window and Rebecca stood up. "There he is," Dan said. "Everything's fine." "They're not the same," Rebecca replied. "He's worse." They heard the car shut off. "I don't believe that," Dan said. "Dad was struggling at the end." "You don't think your brother is struggling?" The front door opened. Thomas stepped in, shaking off every type of winter residue Michigan produced. He hung up his coat, removed his shoes, and walked into the kitchen. "Come on, you're both here," he said. "Speaking highly of me, I'm sure." Rebecca shot him a glance and shook her head. "You need to call. It's miserable out there." "Well, no news is good news, right? If I'm dead or being life-flighted somewhere, I'm sure someone will call you." His mother rolled her eyes and poured coffee. "What are you doing?" Thomas asked his brother. "Same as always," Dan said, nodding at their mother. "She's worried. I get called." "Is there food?" Thomas asked, opening a cabinet. "Cherry says you don't eat anymore," Dan replied. "She lies. Every once in a while I do." "Well, tell us then, what are you up to? Has your ship come in? It's been weeks." There was a hint of sarcasm in his voice. "It's been days," Thomas replied dryly. "It's been weeks," Rebecca reaffirmed. "Oh, here we go. If you must know, there have been some developments." "The energy stuff?" Daniel asked. "Sure, the energy stuff." He narrowed his eyes at his brother condescendingly. Few things in life annoyed Thomas more than having to talk about his work with a family that didn't and couldn't understand it. More of an accident than anything, but it has changed some things. "That's how all the greats did it from what I hear," Dan said. "Putting some wires together, pulling some levers, couple of beakers, green fizzy liquid. Oops, atomic bomb. Will I see your name in the paper soon? I mean a real paper, not this drivel." Dan swung his arm toward a framed article on the wall, a photo of his younger brother smiling back at him. That same younger brother was now leaning against the countertop, not smiling. "I don't know, Dan," he said scornfully. "A lot still needs to happen. How's plumbing?" "Lucrative," Dan said with a smile. "People are clueless. You can charge whatever you want." "I'm sure you do." "Whatever you are doing, I'm sure it can wait," Rebecca said, focusing on her youngest. "There's no reason to work all hours of the night on a project with no deadline." "I don't know, Mom," Dan said with a smile. "Have to beat the South Koreans to the punch. I heard they're getting ready to publish findings that will put Tommy out of a job. It's a race, after all." "Maybe," Thomas said. "I think we're the only ones in this race right now. Just don't let it control you. Your father was notorious for that." "Ah, so this is where we are," Thomas said. Dan laughed. "Where else could we be?" "Don't speak as if I'm not in the room," Rebecca said. "You two don't remember him like I do. He was driven, had no balance, caught up to the point that he couldn't get away." "I remember some of that," Dan replied. "Working was when he was happiest." His mother sighed. "That's not the way I remember it. When he was older, sure, but young, 18, 19. You should have seen him. He didn't care about work. He was almost lazy." "No way," Dan replied. "I'm serious. The summer after his senior year, anyone who knew him would tell you he was set on leaving it all behind. Scholarships, science, the pursuit of discovery. He was going to replace it with hiking. Said he was just going to roam the Ohio countryside. A backpack and some water." "Did he do it?" Thomas asked. No, Rebecca replied. That was when Terry got in the car accident. No, that was later, Dan said, as if he knew. Rebecca looked at her son and shook her head. It's fascinating how you know the history of people's lives from before you were born. She looked at Thomas and pointed at Daniel with her thumb, as if to highlight his foolishness. It was definitely not later. I remember the story, Thomas said. Sounded terrible. I never felt like he went into details around me. I'm sure he didn't, Rebecca replied. Terry was in awful shape. Most people thought he would die. Even when he didn't, the physical therapy was devastating. No one ever knew if he'd walk again, and your father had to take on a lot. Uncle Terry did walk again, Dan said. Yes, he did, Rebecca said. But your father didn't. The two sons looked at her confused. He just kind of gave up on that side of himself. He was always very regimented, but he became so involved helping Terry that summer that he just stopped caring about his other passions. He didn't have time to hike or do anything else. He went to school in the fall, and his life became a routine-driven schedule. Rebecca smiled sadly. It led him to great success. You think things would have been different if Uncle Terry hadn't been in the car accident? Thomas asked. I don't know, she paused. I just would have liked to have seen him on a less burdensome path. Rebecca stood up and started putting dishes in the dishwasher. Speaking of your father, she began again. One of you still needs to go see Professor Crane. It should probably be you, Tom. It should definitely be him, Dan said. I won't understand a word the guy says. Thomas sat down at the kitchen table and leaned his head backwards toward the ceiling. His mother had been pestering him to go see this man for months. His excuses to avoid the trip were running out. I really don't have time, he said. This is some old teacher? This is the old teacher, his mother responded. He emailed me and said he has a number of Dad's old things he wants us to have. I'm not driving to Ohio, and like your brother said, you are probably the best person to speak with him. It's all stuff that relates to your dad's work. I really don't have time. You never have time, and you never will, his mother replied. You've put it off for months. He contacted me again last week. You need to make time. Where is he? He's retired. He lives outside of Athens. It's 4 hours from here. You can do it there and back in a day. I'll set up the time with him for whenever you want. It sounds like he doesn't have much going on these days. Must be nice, Thomas said. Are you going with me? He asked, turning to his brother. No way, man. I'm the busiest Redmond. But enjoy the trip. Ohio is beautiful in late February.